It's getting stuffy in this bunker. If I show you this, will you please not bomb me when I exit? Thank you. After the first 3 years of Bionicle, 2004 took an interesting turn by not going forward towards the future, but backwards towards the past. Unconventional? Yes, but I think it worked out pretty well. Bionicle at this point had built a name for itself, not only for its sets, but for its lore and world building. So taking the story to the past to see even more of that was a pretty exciting prospect. The Piraka themselves seemed to know more than they were letting on, so it was actually pretty gratifying to finally get that information out. But a premise is only as good as its execution. Thankfully, 2004 was able to keep hold of that execution. Similar to 2001, 2004 introduced us to a new team of Toa. Well, not really. We knew them as Piraka, but you know what I mean! I think one thing that helps this year's story stick out more is that these Toa had another challenge, to actually prove they're worthy of the title Toa. Unlike the Toa Mata, who were expected to come to Mata Nui at some point and were hailed as soon as they landed, Toa Metro were just given the roles out of the blue by another Toa. Heck, a lot of Metro Nui's population actually turned against them, mostly due to a disguised Makuta. In a lot of ways, the story is more about becoming true heroes than what 2001 had to offer, because these guys had to start all the way from the bottom, creating quite an impressive story arc. That's kind of a good segue into talking about the characters. Well, yes, there were a few similarities from the Mata to the Metro, such as a colder Toa of ice, a kind Toa of water, and a carefree Toa of air. There was enough to separate them from the Toa we knew prior. For example, while Tahu was brash and prideful, Fakama was doubtful and scared. While Bahatu was friendly and boisterous, Onua was jokey and even kind of a butthole at points. I think their backgrounds actually give them a bit more character too. To give more examples, Onua was an archivist, so he has an extreme fascination with history. Matao was a test pilot, so he has a love for speed and excitement. Heck, Fakama's former job as a mask maker is a major plot point in the story, with him being asked to create the mask of time. Speaking of Fakama, I think he is my favorite character in 2004 and one of my favorite Bionicle characters in general. It's quite a roller coaster ride seeing him transition from a nervous, unsure Toa, believing he wouldn't live up to his hero, Toa Lucan, to a powerful Toa who is ready to step into action. Seeing his development throughout 2005 as well adds on to this. But of course, we had more characters than that. Numatoran, the mysterious Dark Huntress, and heck, I might consider the King Canalo characters here too. Before we move on to the sets, may I just say that I love Metro Nui. In my opinion, it's one of the best locations in Bionicle. Just all the thought and little details that went into making this area feel like a living, breathing place. That's not to say that the island of Mata Nui wasn't well thought out either, but I personally find it more fun to learn more about this place, especially with the Metro Nui City of Heroes book that was published. Give it a read if you haven't. When looking at the sets, a lot of people consider the Toa Metro to be among the best that Bionicle had to offer, having a good mix of posability and functionality that would arguably only be topped over a decade later with a 2015 Toa. While I can't say these were my favorite sets, I can definitely agree with the fan consensus here. Mata Nui knows I've gone against that far too much in this video. The Toa Metro were pretty well built, with the first ever bendable elbows. Yeah, nowadays stuff like this is to be expected. Take notes, elbowless protectors. But at the time, this was something we could only dream about. In fact, the build in general gave a lot of movement and posability options that the prior Toa sets didn't have the luxury of. I pointed this clip in BioRock Dude's Bionicle Stitch video as reference, but we even carried over the weapons that doubled as transportation from the Toa Nuva. I do think the Toa Nuva had more interesting options though, at least in my opinion. I don't know, stuff like skates and fins were more interesting than snowshoes and whatever the heck Nakama has. The other sets were pretty good too. While Avaki lacked the elbows that Toa had, truly a sin, they were still interesting visually. One thing I appreciate is that they took a portion of the body from a previous series of sets, the Rock Sheet, and still managed to make something unique out of it. The Titan sets, while I personally don't think they're as good as the previous year, were still pretty strong and diverse. The Hiki's awkwardly built arms notwithstanding. All three of them had something unique and interesting about them, and even if they weren't perfect, they still had a lot of interesting features and replay value, from the Hiki's claws, to Krekka's foldable launcher, to Nivok's wings. And now we come to Legends of Metro Nui. Consensus says that this one is the best of all the movies, and yeah, I think they're right here too. While the Bionicle movies are far from perfect, I do think Round 2 was the most well made. I'm impressed that the film was able to keep focus on all 6 characters, while making sure they were all developed, and keeping the main focus on Fakama. In general, I think the film had the best characterization out of all 4, with all the characters feeling very similar to their toy counterparts. Also, the tone, atmosphere, and music were great as usual. That's not to say that the movie was perfect. For Kama, while I do like his development, I did find it a bit too annoying with his whining at points. I also didn't like how they skimmed over the search of the Great Discs. I get this is an abridged version of the 2004 story, but I feel like there could have been so much more, especially with how much story took place during that period. My biggest gripe with the movie, though, was Makuda's plan. Not the plan specifically, but, well, did we even know what it was? I mean, I know what entails using the Mask of Time and putting the Metroid in canisters, but yeah, I didn't get what he was trying to do. When you have to look up the plan in the Bionicle Encyclopedia years later, yeah, no, that's a problem. Despite its flaws, I can see why this is the fan favorite out of all four. In general, I can see why 2004 as a whole is so fondly remembered, as it expands on nearly everything we left before. Expanded lore, expanded set builds, expanded characters. It was a great year. One last thing. The heck happened to Vakama's face here? Light bulb. That's much better. Perfect! Yeah, I hinted at 2006 previously, and it's about time we talked about it. This was when the dark meter went into overdrive. We all joke about how edgy the series started to become around this point, but I honestly don't think that should take away from how good this year was. It is a fan favorite after all. The story finally returns back to present day after spending 2 years in the past with a brand new quest. Find the Mask of Life to make sure that Manui doesn't die. Okay. Now this already raises the stakes, as if Manui dies, everyone is screwed. What starts as a journey to a new island goes into a band of thieves and murderers known as the Piraka, the Bionicle Illuminati known as the Order Manui, a new group of Toho known as the Tohonika, and much, much more. A lot happens this year, creating, in my opinion, one of the most interesting storylines the franchise had to offer. So many twists and turns with betrayals and defeats. You really didn't know what was going to happen here. Honestly, I have very few complaints with 2006 story. Maybe a bit of meandering in the first half, but that's about it. Then we have the characters. This is probably the first year that I am aware in which all the villain sets in a wave, Titan's notwithstanding, had unique personalities. In this case, a Piraka. I do think this is a nice change of pace, especially since nearly all the 9 Titan villain characters were just mindless monsters. Then again, these guys aren't exactly cuddly either. Keep in mind that these guys defeated the Tohonuba, our heroes from the previous years. This shows how much of a threat these guys are, especially with abilities that are pretty unique, especially for the series. Creating a prison with your own vision? Splitting your body into microscopic creatures? Adaptation? They went all out with the abilities for these guys. Now as characters, nearly all of them stand out. They're all cruel, ruthless, and master backstabbers, sure, but they have enough to make each one unique. Zaktan is calculating and knows more than he's letting on. Hakan is fiery and angry. Falk is aloof and cold. I think it helps that these baddies were the only ones with their own dedicated chapter book outside the serials. Kinda shows the effort that was put into fleshing these guys out. Of course, we can't forget about Vizon. I mean, I don't think you could even if you wanted to. If you wanted a murderous psychopath in Bionicle Universe, then you got it, making him both entertaining and creepy at the same time. Think Mark Hamill's Joker. The Tohonika were a pretty nice surprise. Like the Tohomechu, they took pre-existing characters, in this case 6 Matoran, and turned them into Toa. A lot of these guys were known for their accomplishments back in the first 3 years of Bionicle, so it's kinda satisfying to see them be rewarded for their actions, by accident I guess, and becoming Toa, and seeing how they adapted to their new abilities, seeing further development from these characters. Then we come to the sets, which many would argue were one of the more interesting aspects of 2006. Remember when I said that 2005 was starting to phase out gear functions? Yeah, there are as many gears in the 2006 sets as the amount of faith I put into the news media. Except maybe Philip DeFranco. He's actually alright. In fact, functionality this year is limited to the Zamasphere launchers and the Piraka's glowing eyes, and since one of the best aspects of the early Bionicle toys were the various functions they had, I can understand why some folks were disappointed, and at the very least, it helped spark the form versus function war that's still going on today. War never changes, I guess. But as I mentioned before, I actually prefer the more posable figure, so I was not affected in any way by this change. There's also the fact that this year introduced the Yenika builds, but we'll get into more detail with that later. The sets themselves? Yeah, actually pretty cool. The Piraka will certainly kick butt with their reptilian designs. One touch I found nice is that you can see their personalities shine through with their faces and spine design. Unfortunately, these spines make it rather difficult to actually move their heads around. It's not good for stop motion, I'll say that much. The Yenika, while not my personal favorite collector of Toa sets, certainly had a more mature edge to them. I don't know, maybe it's the marketing of these guys. They're certainly much more built for combat when compared to the other Toa, even being given guns! Yes, I know the Piraka had these same Stammer Spear launchers, but these are friggin' heroes! But honestly, I think the designs of the Yenika fit the darker tone 2006 was going to go for. It was almost like these heroes are soldiers on a special mission. Something different like this is actually pretty nice to see. I'm honestly not a big fan of some of the mask designs though, and...
Man, I sure do like walking upside down in midair.
Huh. Guess I now know why H-Bot went with him all those years ago. Also, we got arguably one of the best collection of Titan sets in Bionicle's history. He was just so cool and kick butt. Axon with his huge axe and articulated fingers. Mutaka with his awesome color scheme and imposing frame. Vizon and Fenrir with their fear factor and intricate builds. Umbra with his terrible color scheme and foot wheels that make him hard to pose because he keeps rolling. Hey, I didn't say this collection was perfect. 2006 may have been the year that Bionicle went over the edge, but at least it did so with more stride than, let's say, when Sonic tried it a year prior. It's considered to be one of Bionicle's best for a reason, after all. Whew. Made it through that without one mention of the Piraka Rap.
Yo, Piraka!
Son of a biscuit. Let me spin you a yarn and take you back nearly a decade. It was Christmas of 2007. I had received a subscription to LEGO Brickmaster and was looking through the newest issue. At the end, it listed what to expect for the first issue of the next year. And there it was, saying that 2008 was to be the final battle. Now, to be expected, I was hyped as heck! Let's remember, kids, before 2010 gave us enough disappointment to flood a football stadium, 2008 was told to be the big finale to end all finales. Frankly, 2008 is the ending Bionicle should have gotten. But, sort aside, I should probably go over why I think 2008 is deserving of such praise. First, the scale of the story. While most of it was confined to Carter Nui, we knew this was the year that would truly affect everything. If Matanui was awakened, the world would finally be at peace. Not to mention the Toa were not just against any random group of villains, they were up against the Brotherhood of Makuta itself, arguably among the most powerful beings in the Bionicle universe. This crap is tense, man. Being the supposed final battle, a lot happens in 2008's story, and we finally start to get more answers about what's going on in this universe, even if some of the answers were kinda odd. So, Mr. Farshti, you're telling me that these Avmatoran will eventually turn into Bolrock? Whatever you say, mate. May I also say that 2008 has probably one of my favorite plot twists in all of fiction? After finally waking Matanui from his many years of slumber, what were we greeted with? Cheers? Celebration? Pizza and brownies? Ha! Makuta decides to crash the party and reveals that he managed to take over Matanui's body. Let me emphasize that. Makuta, the main villain, actually won. Darn. I can only think of a few other villains who managed to reach this point. And keep in mind, this was a storyline that had lasted 8 years at this point, and we were all trolled. Honestly, this moment alone catapults Makuta into one of my favorite villains. In fact, a lot of the Makuta in general are really good villains. The power-hungry Ikarax, the wary Krika, the bloodthirsty Gorast. A good amount of the story is focused on these guys, and we really get to know them. But in terms of characters, I think we were all looking forward to the return of the Toa Nuva. Let me remind you that it had been 5 years since they've been in the spotlight. These are no longer the inexperienced Toa that had to learn the power of unity. These are experienced veterans who are ready to finally take on their destiny. It's pretty satisfying to see these heroes that we grew up with become what they were always meant to be. In a way, they really don't get that much development this year, but it's more or less about seeing how they have developed and how they react to the new characters and their surroundings. I can't say that the entire cast was the most memorable, like most of the Avmatoran, but overall, I think this was a good selection of characters on display. Then we come to the sets. Now, at this point, the Bionicle build had become a standard for the sets, which kinda annoyed some people at this point. And yeah, I could understand where they were coming from. From 2001 to 2006, the sets always had new body builds with a ton of new parts. But now we were mostly getting new masks, weapons, armor, and a few other pieces. Honestly though, I didn't mind it that much. We may have gotten new body builds in the early years, but it was really hard to justify using some of the old pieces from mocks in the modern age. I refer back to my example for the Meta bodies. This was the first year where it combined both heroes and villains into the same wave. And I don't just mean all the heroes are good and some of the titans are bad. No, 3 heroes, 3 villains, all the same price at the same time. Honestly, I like this change of pace. It's nice to know you can go out, buy a hero and villain at the same time, and have a nice battle between 2 opponents without one side having an advantage or waiting 6 months to even the playing field. Surprised it took LEGO this long to do something like this for a series, but better late than never, I suppose. I am not going to say that all the sets were perfect. The builds for the Admatoran were frankly uninspired and have certainly sparked their memes. Not to mention a few odd mask redesigns and a bit of a silver plague. But that doesn't stop me from enjoying these. All of them had something interesting about them design-wise, whether it was Krika's spine-leaf 4-legged body, Tahu's rotating shield blades, or Bahatu's propeller hands. Is that last one stupid? Yes, but I don't know, I find it to be kinda charming. In general, I do like most of the redesigns of the Toho Nua, more so the ones from the winter wave and less from the summer wave. I don't know, I just prefer some of the older looks when compared to their newer looks. Maybe this is nostalgia talking, I don't know. The Makuta were where I was at though. They are creepy and kooky, but certainly fun to look at and play with. And those vehicles, woo! To be honest, I only managed to get one, the jet tracks, and that was years later. But still, these were certainly impressive things to behold, with their massive size and multitude of weaponry. Even if the versions of the characters these sets came with were certainly interesting. Seriously, what's with the blue wisp coming from their heads? Really, what else can I say? Even with its flaws, I had many good memories in times of 2008. This was the biggest year for Bionicle, both at the time and even now. And it certainly made us hungry for what was to come as we watched the Igniter shoot off into space and read Madame Nui's words, vowing to return. You know, since process of elimination is a thing, I probably shouldn't dramatically build up what my number 1 is. But screw it, it's my birthday, I get to do what I want. Hit it! An unorthodox choice? Absolutely. But honest to gosh, 2007 is my favorite year of Bionicle, and I hope that never changes. But why? Why does this year, above all else, stick out the most to me? Patience, young Padawan. We'll get to that soon. The story of 2007 continues from the previous year as the Toho Bionicle must now travel to the depths of the sea to finally retrieve the Mask of Life and stop the nefarious Baraki. Now, some could argue that this storyline is a bit of a repeat of 2006. Just replace the Piraka with Baraki and take Voya Nui and add water to it. But it's what happens within that familiar structure that makes the story interesting. Learning about the Baraki's past, seeing the uneasy alliances being formed between members of both sides, and of course, Matoro's sacrifice. Before I read the Bionicle Legends books or the 2007 comics, I didn't really care that much for Matoro, just putting him aside for characters I found more interesting, like the Toho Mercuda. But this year made me truly appreciate him as a character. He thought he was the least of the 6 heroes, but turned out to be the greatest of them all. It was hinted at the year prior that he was important, the only one who could touch the Igniter and not become cursed. And when Matanui died, a moment where all hope was lost, at arguably the lowest point both for the Mari and ourselves, Matoro made the ultimate sacrifice. This account has been explained by multiple other people, but does it really detract from its impact? I don't think so. Sheesh, going all emotional before the segment's even done. That's not to say that the other characters weren't good either, they certainly were. While I don't think the Mari were as interesting to hear as they were previously, like the Toho from 2008, it was more about seeing how they interacted to their new surroundings. Especially for Jaller, because of the, oh no, fire and water go as well together as Lego bricks and bare feet. but to me at least, the Piraka were the most interesting characters in this year. Like the Piraka, they were no stranger to fighting amongst themselves, but arguably to a lesser degree. That being said, I always enjoyed seeing these vile villains bounce off one another in their conversations. Also, I've always been a fan of animal motif groups, with each Piraka representing a specific sea creature, even if it took me years before I learned what Takodogs are supposed to be based off of. Most importantly though, they demanded your presence. Not only for their creepy designs, but for their sheer ferocity and vast armies. When you saw them leading armies of sea creatures against our heroes, you knew it was going to be one heck of a struggle. One of my favorite aspects of 2007 were the sets. Now, let's look back at each wave up until now. When it came to the regular Toa size sets, what was the biggest problem with these? Every build was the gosh darn same. Other than mass, weapons, color schemes, they were assembled in the exact same way, almost like an assembly line. If you built 2 or 3 sets in a series, you could basically put the rest together without looking at the instructions, admittedly making it a bit tedious. So while 2007 didn't have a totally new building style, what it did have was a slightly different way of assembling each set. Yes, they all basically used the Inika builds, but nearly all the sets had more differences between them when it came to how they were made, even if they were minor. This, to me at least, was a heck of a lot more interesting, and even gave more diversity to their designs and looks, making each set in a series even more unique than before. You can't tell me that Mantax was built the same way Alec was, or that Holly was built the same way Motoro was. Not to mention, since these sets were now sticking to a previous build without creating a whole new one, it would not make the previous build obsolete. Instead, LEGO had the chance to add upon to what they had and create new parts to go with the builds. I already stated why I like this change when I talked about 2008, so I won't repeat myself. Not all the sets were winners, I will admit. I'm not a big fan of how limited Nuparo's arm movement was with those large Piraka arm pieces. Like, even coming with 2 blasters rather than 1 blaster and a unique weapon was, frankly, lazy. But I do enjoy most of these sets, the Piraka especially, since they have some really unique builds that I haven't seen used in many other waves. Also, even though I have my complaints, I do mostly prefer the designs of the Mari when compared to their Inika counterparts. While I will always enjoy Jowler's Inika design, if only because we got H-Boss version of the character out of it, Mari Jowler has, in my opinion, one of my favorite Toa designs in the series. I just love the sleek design they gave him, and the red, orange, and black color scheme just make him come alive. The Titans were pretty great too. Hydraxon looked powerful and deadly, Godunga was not only creepy but had a unique body build, and Maxilos and Spinax, while I believe they were trying to copy elements of Vizon and Fenrak, what with it being a 2-for-1 set with a creature and character, were still interesting to look at and build. Karzani was also one of my favorite sets. Not only did the titular villain have a sickly and intimidating design, but he came with 2 other Matoran and a trap, so for $40 you have an entire scene player in front of your very eyes. Great stuff! But with that being said, there's still one very good reason why 2007 is my favorite. I brought this up in my History of Bionicle video, but I think it's fitting to bring it up here. 2007 made me a fan of Bionicle again. While I loved 2005 and 2006, especially nowadays, back during that time, I noticed I wasn't enjoying the sets as much as I used to. I wasn't playing with the sets that much, and I mostly bought them for display and, well, because I was already a fan. I began to see the shift in late 2005 as I bought only 4 Visorak, but 2006 was really noticeable as I only got 3 of the Piraka and 4 of the Inika. I still bought the Titans, but the effects were still present. When 2007 rolled around, I only bought 1 of the Baraki. At this stage, I probably would have moved on to something else, but then I received the summer 2007 LEGO catalog, and then I saw the new Bionicle sets. The Mari, the Titans, the vehicles. I was certainly intrigued, but it was only when I started looking at them more and more when my heart truly began to spark again. I wanted to get most of these sets, and for my birthday and Christmas that year, I did. For nearly a month, I played with these sets every night, creating my own stories. I could safely say, without a doubt, that I was a fan again. So without 2007, I might not have gotten to experience the Battle Card Nui, the Barra Magna Saga, Bionicle's End, Hero Factory's Turn of the Wheel, Bionicle's Revival, Its Sudden Death Once More. I might not have created this very channel that you have been watching for 5+ years. Is this reasoning sappy? Most definitely. But for all the memories it gave me and keeping me a dedicated fan, I have no reason to not list it as my favorite year of Bionicle. Even if Bionicle G3 comes to fruition, I don't think 2007 will ever be topped for me. Now I ask you, what are your favorite years of Bionicle? What do you think made them so good? Please tell me in the comments, I will be happy to read them. I'm Shade2000, and I'm off to celebrate 21 years of being on this earth. Godspeed everyone.